Welcome to our e-learning digital classes. Myself, Sayyed Rubina, heartily welcome you in this session. Students, last time we have studied lesson number 3, the earth and its living world. I hope that you must be understand that lesson very well. Students, do complete your homework regularly. When the school will run physically, I will check your homework. Now today, it's time for lesson number 4. Lesson number 4, environmental balance. Students, you are watching many living things around us. Some living things are micro. Micro means small. Some are microorganisms which we can't see with our naked eyes. At the same time, some are macro. Macro means very large. Some animals are very large in size. So, all these living things and non-living things such as air, sun, water, this all, there is an interaction between living and non-living thing. That we want to study in this lesson, environmental balance. Variety we see in our surrounding and which belong to a particular area, that is known as biodiversity. It means that suppose we consider one region. In that region, many kinds of living things are there, from microorganism to macroorganism. So, the living thing which particularly belong to some place, that is known as biodiversity. To understand this lesson, students, here I am sharing one video link. You must watch it carefully and try to understand the concept.
Good morning, students. Today we are going to do an interesting chapter in science, which has a deep link with us. All species are important and help in keeping ecosystem balanced. The balance of nature is a concept which describes the state of equilibrium between living organisms like human beings, plants and animals, and also their environment. Now we will try to understand the food chain through a following video.
All living things need energy to survive. So where does that energy come from? Well, matter and energy passes from one organism to another, connecting living things like links in a chain. A food chain. Of course, a food chain is not an actual chain. It's a way to talk about the relationships between organisms and show how matter and energy flow between living things. Every living thing on Earth is part of a food chain, including you, and most things are part of more than one. All of the energy in Earth's food chains comes from the sun. The sun's energy reaches the Earth as light and heat, and plants capture some of it and convert it into food through photosynthesis. Because plants make or produce their own food from the sun's energy, they are called producers. Every food chain must begin with a producer, for example, grass. That's because animals cannot create their own food. They must eat or consume energy from other sources. That's why animals are called consumers. The second link in a food chain is a consumer that eats plants, an herbivore. When an animal eats plants, some of the energy the plant captured from the sun is transferred into the animal's body, where it is used for things like moving, breathing, and growing. An herbivore is called a primary consumer. Primary means first, because an animal eating plants is the first consumer in the food chain. Let's add a rabbit to our food chain. Next comes a secondary consumer, the second consumer in the food chain. This consumer is a carnivore and gets their energy by eating other animals. Maybe our rabbit will get eaten by a fox. When the fox eats the rabbit, part of the energy that the rabbit got from the grass is transferred to the fox. This is the end of this simple food chain. The rabbit eats the grass, then the fox eats the rabbit. The energy that came from the sun is captured by the grass, transferred to the rabbit, and then transferred to the fox. Some food chains are longer than this one, but there can't be too many links in a food chain. Each animal in the food chain uses up a lot of the energy from the previous level instead of passing it on, meaning that only about 10% of the energy consumed by an animal will be passed on to the next level. Let's take a look at a longer food chain that also begins with grass. This time, let's make our primary consumer a grasshopper. The grasshopper eats the grass and then gets eaten by a secondary consumer, a bluebird. Then the bluebird gets eaten by a tertiary or third-level consumer, a snake. The snake is eaten in turn by an owl. The owl is the apex predator in this food chain. Apex predators are not hunted and eaten by any animals. We say that they are at the top of the food chain. You probably recognize a lot of apex predators, like lions, sharks, eagles, and crocodiles. Just because they don't get eaten doesn't mean that they don't contribute to the food chain, however. When an animal dies, their body is broken down by decomposers. Decomposers are usually bacteria and fungi that break down dead plants and animals into nutrients in the soil, that in turn help the plants at the beginning of the food chain to grow. It's the circle of life. Natural ecosystems usually have more complicated food chains, however. A network of interconnected food chains is called a food web. The arrows are used to show which direction the energy flows and help keep track of the connections between organisms. Now that you understand a little bit more about food chains, see if you can find the connections between living things around you.
Food chain in ecology, the sequence of transfer of matter and energy in the form of food from organism to organism. Food chain intertwine locally into a food web because most organisms consume more than one type of animal or plant. Food chain is made of producer, consumers, and decomposers. Plants which convert the solar energy to food by photosynthesis is the primary source of the food chain. Producers are organisms that can obtain energy without taking in matter from other animals. Producers get their energy from non-living things such as sunlight. Because of this, producers are known as autotrophs. Since producers do not eat other organisms, they are at the bottom of food chain. So producers are autotrophs or organisms that produce their own food. Animals who eat other animals for the survival are known as consumers. The role of consumers in an ecosystem is to obtain energy by feeding on other organisms and sometimes transfer energy to other consumers. Changes that affect consumers can impact other organisms within ecosystem. They are also known as heterotrophs because they don't prepare their own food. Student, decomposers are very small. We cannot see them through our naked eyes. To see them, we need microscopes. They are always present in our environment, in the air. The decomposers eat dead organisms, both producers and other consumers, and break down the remains. Decomposers process decaying tissues and return nutrients and other necessary molecules. Students, there are many processes and cycles present in our environment due to which environmental balance is maintained. And out of that, the one process we are going to talk about is photosynthesis. It is the process by which autotrophic, that means plant, use light energy to make sugar and oxygen gas from carbon dioxide and water. With this process, oxygen is given out and carbon dioxide is taken in to prepare food by the plants. Another process is water cycle, students. Water evaporates from ocean and then returns to the land in the form of rain is known as water cycle. Now students, you can look at the picture and can think about it, what it's representing. It represents that grass is eaten by grasshopper, grasshopper is eaten by frog, frog is eaten by snake, and at last snake is eaten by fox. And after that, there is a role of decomposers, such as microorganisms. Students, all living things need energy to live and grow, and the flow of energy from an organism to another is known as food chain. A food chain shows the feeding relationship between different organisms in a particular environment or habitat. A food chain is a network of links in a food web. It shows a direct transfer of energy between organisms. So, students, at last, environmental balance brings the existence of the world. Us inhabitants, such as human being, plant, and animal, and other microorganisms, continue to survive. These species get a conducive environment to multiply and thrive. The world gets to produce sufficient food for all species. By maintaining green environment, the world achieves its equilibrium state that benefits and protects all living organisms in it.
Then, I hope that you must have understood this lesson. But if you have any doubt, then please note down your doubt in notebook and ask me in our next webinar session. Thank you.